with Dr. Mother Love to have you join us. And I want to give a big shout out first to everybody who watched my video on TikTok. Thank you very much. It's so silly. You gotta go and don't get mad about me spending my money for singing lessons. It's hilarious. Go on TikTok and check out Mother Love on what the world needs now. I got some information that I want to share with you that's gonna hopefully help you save your life and your family's lives and other people, because you will have the necessary tools to make sure that you can live safe and get ready to live ready. There's a book that this guy wrote. His name is Sam Rosenberg, and it's a book called Live Ready. Live ready. I mean, we always say, if you're already ready, you ain't got to get ready. You right there. And he's talking about gun violence, and specifically, and how you can. Oh, is that him? Hey, what's up with you, Sam? Oh, he looks scary, huh? Oh, that's just a picture. Oh, okay, all right. But nonetheless, so you can see the picture. That's Sam Rosenberg right there. And his book is called Live Ready: A Guide to Protecting Yourself in an Uncertain World. I mean, we have gotten to the point that the United States has become the murder capital of the world. Not to say that other atrocities are not happening in other countries to other people. Right now, we're talking about making sure that you can be safe, that you have the tools that are necessary for you to learn how to move around and learn what to do. One of the things when we were growing up, we were always taught travel in packs. The more they can't whoop all of y'all at one time. So traveling packs, don't go into a dark place, with that place that you don't see, where you're dark and nobody can see you. Don't go into a place where people can't hear you scream. One of the things that used to frighten, well, still frightens a lot of people, but it was just a fright. It wasn't something that happened. I was a camp counselor. I was also a camper, and we would go out into the woods in that stark of night and to work to navigate ourselves back. And that was a lot of useful information that helped us, in case we got lost, we would, know where the markers were, and always keep a flashlight. I knew that, always keep a flashlight. And one of my mother's friends was a letter carrier, and he taught us how to make a newspaper, a rolled up newspaper, he carried a rolled up magazine. He said, because most people are not going to look at you, if you got a magazine rolled up under your arm, and they're not going to look at it as a weapon. They're going to look at it however crazy they look at it, and they want to come to attack you. And people are doing some crazy, crazy things. I mean, people are just getting killed for walking down the street. People are getting killed for being Black or Latino or any other color, any other nationality that is not, white men. And people, I mean, some people are literally hunting people to kill with these assault rifles and these weapons of mass destruction that should not be in any person's care, that is not a police officer and is not in the military. I mean, it's horrible that we have to think about that. The criminals have better equipment, have better guns than the police do. I mean, they don't let what the police have, I'm sure, stuff to take you down. The military has stuff to take you down. And they're saying that, that's the only people who should have those kind of weapons. The military, the police departments, and they don't have first responders. And this was something that I just didn't even think about. That we are in the murder world. We've had over 300 mass shootings last year. That was just, the numbers are just so hard to fathom. And in Sam Rosenberg's book, he talks about something that I'm sure probably most of us wouldn't have ever even thought about. We got the murder capital, and he was saying that they could fudge the numbers about, and what they don't tell you about is how many people are saved from victimization, and their lives are saved, where they went from being a murder victim to being a survivor of that attack. And they was, and this just kind of blew my mind. He says that the tourniquet, stop the bleeding, and how a lot of first responders and police officers, 50 years ago, we had never even heard of a lay person like us, carrying around equipment for a tourniquet, but we learned how to do it in first aid, do basic first aid when we were Girl Scouts and Girl Scout leaders, teaching them how, to help them with whatever it was, a tourniquet, because you don't know what's going to happen to you. You out in the woods in the middle of the night, crazy is what you're doing. And he's saying that they don't count. They did a paper, a report. These some young people up in Massachusetts, and I think at Harvard University, where they did a paper on homicides, and they said that they don't really count the people that were saved, were saved and didn't die from a violent act. They only count the ones that are dead, and dead is dead. And then you have people that have been helped and survived such a violent act simply with a tourniquet, and that fact that a lay person could come in and just shoot up everybody if that's what they felt like doing. And it's like we've turned into like just so vicious to each other. And they never talk about, see, the good stuff never gets talked about. If a police officer, first responder comes to a bad scene and they're able to help save somebody, and get them to the hospital quickly so they can be saved, they don't talk about the medical field. He says that medical technology has saved a lot of people from being murder victims, and those people who survived are not counted in the murder because they've been saved. So they're not murder victims. And he also said, and this one kind of, got me. There's a difference. Do you know there's a difference between assault and aggravated assault? And there's a differentiation. And they're saying that aggravated assault is harder. Just regular assault is easier to prove than aggravated assault. And I mean, there's just so many things in this book. Everybody, in my opinion, everybody needs to get this book. I mean, he talks about learned helplessness. Now, I know about learned helplessness. That's when you say, oh, I'm not going to get involved. Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, woe is me. Oh, that's somebody else to do it. Somebody else will live ready and be ready. I don't want to get involved in that. And then when it happens to you, feel helpless. You feel helpless. We've had so many mass shootings at schools and in churches and the grocery store. You can't even go into Walmart and Target and the movie theater. And, how do you get out from up under this murderous umbrella that we are all under here in the United States? I mean, it was bad enough. We have a son, and we have a lot of nephews and a lot of young men in our family. And we've had to sit down and this was to get them ready. These young Black guys, you got to sit them down by the time they're 11 and 12, maybe even, you don't want to scare them, but you got to teach them how to, we had to sit down and teach. My husband and I sat down and we had to teach him how to, if he's ever pulled over by the police, if he's ever, approached by people, if he's ever approached by, don't run in gangs, but know how to take care and respond to the police. Because I don't think the police go out there. Maybe some of them do because there's bad apples in every profession. But for the most part, our men and women in blue are there to protect and serve. And yeah, we get some bad apples, and some of them are worst apples. The guy that killed George Floyd, and they got it on videotape with him snuffing the life out of this man, for something that was so minor. They can say whatever they want to say. And this was a bad police thing. One of my sorority sisters, God rest her soul, was pulled over by the police. She had just got her a new job and then moved to a new place, and she was going to, get her stuff ready to be a school teacher. And they pulled her over for whatever asinine reason. This soror ended up dead. They said she committed suicide off the bed and and hung herself. That just sounds real stupid because we don't do stuff like that. And a lot of stuff, we have to question. And they'll say, well, oh, this was a suicide, or this was a murder suicide. It can get crazy. It can really get crazy. And he wrote this book. He has been in the security business for over 20 years, protected some very high profile people. And he said he protects everybody, but what he doesn't do, and what he did do when he saw all of the things were going on and all these mass shootings, he said, it's my turn to stand in the gap. And I mean, he didn't have to write this book. He didn't have to say, tell us anything. He felt compelled to write this book, Live Ready, a guide to protecting yourself and it could have been and your family and your loved ones, yourself and your loved ones in an uncertain world because it's uncertain. Our son when he go to school, and he caught the bus. He talking about, I'm not getting a car when I'm 16. You got a job when you're 16? Yeah, you can get a car. I have no problem. So he took the bus, and when he left to go to school, sometimes it would be dark, or just the day would just be breaking. Every day, I pray that my son, your husband, your uncles, all your family members come home in one piece. I couldn't even imagine, having to say, oh, here's that. I was just getting ready to say, did you stand me up on our first date? And I said, I don't care. Here, I'm going to talk about him anyway. I'm going to talk about you anyway. What you talking about? Hey, Sam Rosenberg.
How you doing? I'm so sorry. We little
don't
technical
worry about
issues
it, baby.
there.
We got you now. I got your back. Don't worry about it. I got your back. I got your back. And so I've been telling people about the book. And what made you, because you were in such a high profile position, what made you decide that it was time for you to write this book?
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, I've been, as you know, from the last 25 years, I protected a variety of high profile people but I've been also in the business of really teaching people how to protect themselves. I mean, since 2003, my philosophy has always been, it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim.
And don't tell the truth.
So I've always tried to really impart this information to people, and I've done so over the last 20 years. And I've always wanted to write this book. But to be honest with you, it took me till now to really put pen to paper. The last 3 years, I decided now was the time to make sure this information got into the hands of as many people as I possibly can, because there's only so many people I can personally touch and present to. And, the number one question I would get over the years is, how do I get my family or, my other loved ones to receive this training and this information? So I decided in about 3 years ago to start writing the book. It took me a while. We went through a variety of iterations, but now I'm quite proud of the work, and it's been well received. Thank you.
Absolutely well received. And we have to thank your publicist, Roger Neal, for hooking us up, because you have some great information. I was talking to them about the fact that, and this tripped me out, when you say in the book that the medical profession, medical technology has kept the murder numbers down. And I was trying to explain it as best I could, but now that I got the expert on, I told you I got experts. I know people. We do things. Talk about how that number is not being affected, how that affects the murder part. Because you said dead is dead.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that when a lot of times, and what you're referring to is a lot of information that was provided by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, who's one of the top researchers on this subject of violence in our society and school violence, et cetera. And he makes a very powerful point in a variety of his works and his books and publications that when we look at the dynamic of when we say, is a society violent? So many times we misinterpret the information. We look at the murder rate. And what we really should be looking at is the amount of time or how often people are attempting to kill each other. So when we look at the murder rate, functionally speaking, the medical technologies over the last, let's just say 30 to 40 years have dramatically changed things. In advances in emergency room and trauma medicine, advances in ambulance care, communications, being able to get emergency responders on site quickly, being able to get people to the hospitals quicker. And when we talk about just the last, say, 10 to 15, 20 years at the most, simple things like law enforcement officers and EMTs carrying around tourniquets that in the old days, when I would say when we were growing up, they would always tell us that if you put a tourniquet on, you're going to lose the limb. So nobody ever used them. And I would say one of the good things that has come out of the last 20 years of war is the advancements, massive advancements in life-saving technology for trauma. Tourniquets being one of them, that you can put a tourniquet on an injury and stop a limb from bleeding out very, very easily and effectively. And that's saving the murder, that's saving lives and keeping the murder rate down possibly as high as threefold from what it was just a few years prior. And when we look at other technologies like hemostatic agents, things that can stop arterial bleeding instantly, those kinds of technologies are dramatic in terms of their life-saving capacity.
You know what? You brought up a point about the hemostats. I
Mm-hmm.
got little hemostats in case it's a kid. People think I'm sick and twisted. Okay, I am sick and twisted, Sam. But nonetheless, I have a presence of mind. I keep a small pair in my purse, and I keep a bigger pair.
Mm-hmm.
Not too big, but where I can clamp off a vein. I can clamp off an
Mm-hmm.
artery if I need to do that. And I thank God that He's given you to us, and that you're sharing this information. So before we go any further, tell us about Sam Rosenberg, because you've been protecting some mighty high profile people. What's your readiness like for you to get ready to protect these high profile people? And what made you
Well,
even get into this? I mean, did you wake
well,
up one day and say, Sam, I think I want to be into human security? How did that come about?
in a very weird way, I've always been into martial arts and things like that. I've always
Mhm,
been in this sort of protector mindset.
mhm,
When I look back, I realize that my young childhood and who I am and what I do is not a far cry from sort of the track that I've been on since I was born. Okay.
mhm,
But that being said, it was a weird situation in that I went in the Marine Corps. I had a scenario, and I talk about it in the first chapter of the book. My first security job, if you want to call it that, was as a bouncer in a college bar. Okay. And I was at Pitt. I was a wrestler on the Pitt team, and a buddy of mine came up to me and said, "You want a job, Sam, where you can meet lots of girls but get paid next to nothing?" And I said,
It's
"Of
always
course."
the women. You always use the women for. It's a lot of women over there on that
Hmm.
college campus. A lot of chicks come in the club. You can have your pick. See, y'all are so bad.
Well,
Okay, so go ahead. You said
so,
you want
I'm
to be
not going to
the
lie.
boss.
Okay. That was part of the motivation. So,
Uh-huh.
I end up working there, and I'm on my second shift. Okay. It was a Friday night. The place was jammed. And I remember that the sort of advanced crisis response planning of this organization that they had taught me was that when there's trouble in the bar, they would flash the lights in the vestibule where the bouncers hung out. And we were supposed to come running in and figure it out. And that's the extent of my training. And so I didn't know any better. I was 20 years old. I'm this young kid. I can't even drink in the bar, and I'm in this sort of capacity. And I'm trying to look like I know what I'm doing and checking IDs and everything. And the lights flash, and me being the gung ho guy that I am, I got to be the first one through the door, right? So I start running in, making my way through this crowd at this fight. And, I get to the fight. I push this one guy off of this college kid. I pin him to the bar because I didn't want him to come back swinging. And, my assumption was my fellow bouncer would grab this guy, but he hesitated.
Mhm.
And the guy that I pushed didn't. He sort of bounced off the crowd. He whips a gun out of his waistband and sticks it in my face. And he says, "Now I'm going to kill you." All right. And, I remember very clearly that how they say your life flashes before your eyes, in the
Mhm.
movies. I can tell you that my life has never flashed before my eyes. And in this case, or any of the other ones that I've been in that would be kind of, I would say, qualify as life and death.
Mm.
But what did happen was interesting. My brain jumped back to a memory when I was like 12 years old or something like that. And
Mhm.
I was doing karate or something, and I was talking to my dad.
Mhm.
And I said, "Hey, Dad, what do I do if a guy's got a gun?" And he told me in this sort of well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful way. He says, "Well, do whatever the guy with the gun tells you."
Mm.
So, I fast forward to this moment, and this flashback took a second. And the problem was the bad guy, if you will, was not telling me to do anything. He had threatened me, but there was no instruction.
Mhm.
So this little computer program that I'd put in completely failed, and it was unable to process. And I literally just froze. Okay. And I had all of the kind of experiences of extreme adrenaline, tunnel vision, and everything getting quiet, and this seeming like this lasted, minutes, not just seconds. And the reality is that after a while, I realized he wasn't going to shoot me in the face. I was able to grab the gun, and we kind of negotiated our way out of it. and nobody got hurt. Okay. But the dynamic left me really thinking, and it changed my perspective, because I went back into the vestibule and we're trying to act cool, like no big deal. And, my fellow bouncer turned to me and he says, Sam, they're paying us like 35 bucks a night for this job before taxes. And he goes, this isn't worth it. Right. So he quit. That was the end of that. And,
He quit.
but honestly, my perspective was more one of confusion. I had this question that I kept coming back to, which is, in a nutshell, what the heck just happened here? Why is it that everything that I thought I knew about violence and its management from doing martial arts and wrestling and whatever else, was demonstrated instantly to be false? And the first realization I had made me very uncomfortable, which was that it was not my body that had failed me. It was my mind. I was bigger, younger, stronger, faster than the guy I was dealing with. I was a wrestler, all this kind of stuff. None of that had any bearing on the equation when the introduction of that gun was there, because I didn't have any experience with it. And
that'll kind of do it to you.
Yeah. And this made me very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about this, and I thought, well, I've heard of people who could certainly make good decisions under pressure, could think and take action. And I wanted to understand what that dimension was that I was lacking. So I decided to pivot my career. I was going to be a school teacher at the time. I was heading in that direction. And I decided
you wanted to be a school teacher. What did you want to teach?
I don't know. Probably history. I was a history major.
Okay.
But I like the idea of teaching, but what ended up happening was I decided to kind of figure this out. So I went where I thought the toughest people on the planet were. So I went and I joined the Marines. Went through the OCS program.
The Marines.
That's right. Semper
Blacked
Fi.
out group of people. Let me tell you something. And thank you for your service, sir. I appreciate and adore and I'm humbled by the sacrifices that you were willing to make, and the sacrifices that other young men and women made, and the biggest sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice, their lives. There's no way in the world I understand how people could talk about the military and talk about police officers, disbanding the police officers, but as soon as you're behind get into hot water, then you holler, oh, where the popo at? I thought they was coming. I need some. Make up your mind. Which way you want to be, on this side of the fence of protection, or you and help the police, or you want to just live in fear? And a lot of people, unfortunately, are living in fear. I mean, I'm living in a bit of not really fear, but apprehension, because I believe that my husband and I and the people that we had surrounding in our circle, allowed him to have the tools to grow into being a responsible man, let me tell you something. I wouldn't want to be a black man in this country right now. And these guys, and it's not just black men, it's all men. It's like people on the war path for you. They want to, move you out the way, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm a girly girl. I am a girly girl. I'm there to protect my son and just pray every day that all the sons and all the daughters make it home safely, because some of them will not. And I don't think most people go out intending to harm anybody or intending to kill people, but some people do. That little kid, what's his name? Rittenhouse. He got a gun. He got an assault rifle, cross state lines to shoot people, and then it was like, and he got off. When you see things like this, what goes through your mind, and how can you help us to make sure that these things don't keep going, and what we can do when they do happen? I mean, people went to the grocery store. Wasn't nobody expecting nobody to come up in the grocery store with a gun and kill people. When you see this, what goes through your head as a peace officer and as a security expert?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a peace officer. Okay. So, I went from the Marines into the close protection. Yeah.
A security specialist. My bad.
Yeah. And I only make that distinction because I greatly respect, like you said, the men and women who, sign on that dotted line, wear a uniform and go out there with the intent. And most law enforcement that I've dealt with, the vast majority are decent people who really want to do right, and they would want to be there to save you and to protect people. But they even recognize that, in today's world. I mean, when we're talking about whether it's active shooters or mass homicide or what have you, or even just this incredible rise in violent crime. I mean, we've seen, you know, what, a 300% increase in violent crime from 21 to 22, and another significant jump from 22 to 23. Okay, so it's an exponential problem, and we all know it, we all feel it, even though many people, you know, live in safe neighborhoods and we are well protected. The reality is it's there, and there is this level of apprehension, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book. But just to double back for 2 seconds, when you asked me how I got into this, when I left the Marines, I found myself allergic to bureaucracy. Okay, so I went in. I
Wait a
went
minute.
in, you know.
I just want people to know. You see how pretty he said that? And you just really made that sound pretty. Because I know what you're thinking. I'm
Yeah.
allergic to BS too. And they didn't give me the handbook. They didn't tell me the rules and regulations. You know, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna what you say when you ran in when the lights flashed in the club, you just ran in, you know, first word in. I'm like,
Yep.
see, I'm there to tell. Let me tell. I saw Sam. He ran in there first. I'm gonna be the one. I'm gonna be the witness. I'm gonna be the witness because anybody who is willing and deliberately to strap on equipment, sometimes 30 or 50 pounds on your back every day, and you willing to do this, I can't kiss you all enough. You know, you got to be a little bit crazy to
Yeah.
do stuff like we
Well,
do.
we
You
all
know.
we
But
all are a little
that's
bit,
what
you
makes
know.
it fun. That's what makes it worthwhile
Hmm.
because in giving people this information in your book, Live Ready. And how do we know we're not living ready? How do we get ready?
Well, you know, when I got out of the Marines and I got in the protection world, what I realized was not only, I mean, we were there, I sort of fell into this, you know,
Mhm.
and I say close protection world's a fancy pants way of saying bodyguarding. And whether I was protecting heads of state or, you know, if I was protecting celebrities, whatever it is, or just people who are in difficult situations, what I found was that over the years dealing with them, and sometimes I was working with some very, very well placed people who were well protected by society, had conquered every measure of success that most people would measure by, whether it's
Mhm.
monetary or whatever. And a lot of them were living great lives, but there was this desire. Okay, there was this need, this lacking need,
Mhm.
that in the back of their mind they had this thought that said, you know, someone could take this all away in a heartbeat, and they wanted to know how to protect themselves, not
Mhm.
only be protected.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that I got into the teaching aspect of this, and it
Mhm.
evolved over time. And
Mhm.
I found that to be universal, right? Whether I'm working with little kids,
Mhm.
you know, and you know, we don't want to scare our kids, and we don't want, like, when do I approach young people, or when do we as parents approach our young kids and talk about what to do in an active shooter event, or what do we even say? You know, I found that even kids get it. They're hungry to know how to perform. They want to know, like, don't scare me, prepare me, right? You know, how
Oh,
do I handle things? And even with my own kids, I remember having a
how
conversation with
many
my
kids you
daughter
got?
when she was like,
How many kids do you
I've
have?
got two. I've
Two
got two.
kids, girls or boys?
Two. My daughter's 15, my son's 13. And
Oh,
so
you got
we're right in it,
teenagers
you
in
know?
your house.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
We
We're
just
right
gonna
in it.
send a prayer up for you because you know teenagers make you understand why some species eat their young.
Well,
Listen,
at
I'm
times I
living
can
on house
relate.
money. My mother could
I-
have killed me 17 times, and she would have said, she said, I will kill you, I'll kill you and resurrect you and kill you again. I'm like, you don't want to you don't want to scare them, and especially the little kids. I
yeah.
mean, I I cried so much after the Sandy Hook massacres. You know,
Yeah.
that could have been my grandchildren. That
Yeah.
could have been my niece or my nephew. And
Hmm.
to have somebody that is so angry and so deranged and so misguided that this is what you feel like you have to do. How can we get cut this so much gun violence? And is it the guns or is it the people?
I mean, it's definitely the people.
Mhm.
I will say that, you know, as someone who has been studying this problem for many, many years, for more than 2 decades now. And I created one of the first active shooter training programs for teachers to teach teachers how to respond if they come face to face with an
Hmm.
armed intruder.
Hmm.
And this has been something I've been very nose to the ground, very intimately involved with. And I will say this, okay? So regardless, when we look at the complexity of
Hmm.
all of the issues at stake, right? Whether it's, access to weapons or this or that, what I have always come back to is that I try to come to the root level of things. And I want you to understand, if we wave a magic wand, snap our fingers, whatever we do, and all of the guns in society disappear, they vanish, and they're no longer here. The problem is we have not addressed the root cause of this issue. And we will continue to see the same manifestation of violence. We will just see it in different forms, where we see attacks with knives like we see in places like China or Southeast Asia, where there aren't as many guns or there aren't as much access.
But
Horrific
they're still having
attacks,
murders as well.
attacks in nursery schools and daycare centers, or on trains and commuters. You'll see cars being driven into crowds like we've seen over the years in Paris, Nice, France, things
Mm.
like that. So the idea here is that this violence is not something that is constrained to the use of firearms. What we have to understand is the psychology of the people who commit such attacks, and understand how to identify them in advance and then intervene. And that is all addressed in the book. And it's too
Mm.
big of a subject to get into in a forum like this without a lot of time. But I can tell
Well,
you,
baby, we ain't got nothing but time. But I don't want you to give it all the way here because people really need to read this book. And
yeah,
the way that you've got it set up, it's not, it doesn't seem like it's a, and tell me if I'm wrong. It doesn't seem like oh, well, let me read this book. Okay, and I'm gonna put it down and I don't need it. This is a book that you would come back to
yeah,
often because you
mhm,
can, it's like a movie. You can see the movie 15 times and every time you see it you see something different. Every time you
definitely.
see it you see something different, you learn something different. And you say, when you were saying we got to think about the psychological makeup of the person who is committing these crimes, I don't know if
Mhm.
you, I'm sure it is, because and this is, you're talking about mass shootings for the most part, or is this all gun killings? When a deranged husband comes in and kills his wife and all his kids, are they put in that category of murder?
No, I mean, what I do is I look at it very specifically, and again, this is all in the book. And let me just frame this for
Mm.
the viewing audience. Okay, so there are two interrelated themes to this book. The first theme is the idea of what I call the myth of helplessness. And I firmly believe that whether we want to admit it, whether we talk about it, whether we even think about it, what we have all been conditioned to believe is that we are helpless in the face of certain kinds of violence or certain kinds of crises, that we have to leave that to the professionals. And the reality, though, is that we all know that the lifeguards of society, as willing as they may be to be there and to try and help, they're not going to be there when we need them most.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to swim. So we know that. But the other interrelated theme of this book is what I call the myth of randomness. So one of the things that I really have a problem with is when the news media or a lot of people, they use the term random when they talk about violence.
Mm-hmm.
We hear the news say it's a random act of violence, or we hear people say nobody saw it coming, or the guy just snapped. And whenever we use phrases like that, what we are saying is that violence is random and therefore unpredictable. And if it is unpredictable, then what responsibility can we or anyone else have to stopping it and or to preventing it?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality of it is that violence is not unpredictable. It is a process. And it is a process as predictable and as observable in many ways as watching water coming to a boil, to quote Gavin de Becker, one of the top thought leaders in this space for 30 years
Mm-hmm.
or more. The idea is that we just need to know what to look for and be in a position to see the signs. So we may not, you and I may
Excuse me.
not be in a position to see the signs of someone who decides one day to come into a concert and start shooting,
Right.
or killing people in some fashion. But the reality of it is, even in those scenarios, in the worst case, we got to know how to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And how to respond very often is very counterintuitive. And how we have to think and prepare ourselves to manage these events is very important. This book, Live Ready, goes through every aspect of this entire continuum from a standpoint of, I wanted it to be so that my kids could read this book. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, my kids could read this book and understand the most important fundamentals that I need to teach them and everybody else in society. How to recognize danger. What do you do if you're being targeted? And that's something of a scary concept. People are going, I don't get targeted. The reality is you could be walking down the street and someone could target you, and you have to know the warning signs, the indicators that someone may be looking at you as a potential victim. We also need to know how to address it. How do we manage what I call the interview dynamic, or the eye of what I call time?
Mm-hmm.
This phase along this continuum of the way bad guys behave and how they select and operate, and how to select their targets and operate. How do we know where we can intervene?
One of the things you say in the book, and I'm glad you brought up the bad guy thing, because you say in the book, one of your chapters is think like a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
How do we think like a bad guy?
So it's a little bit of a play on words. I mean, obviously, number one, I don't want anyone to truly think like a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I use that phrase is because in the protection industry, I always tell people that we have to always think like a bad guy and look at the target or look at the situations from that perspective and that lens and say, if I were going to assassinate or humiliate or target this client, this principal, how would I go about doing it? And what are the vulnerabilities, things like that. So when I get into the psychology of bad guys, and this goes back to your earlier question of our domestic, violence, is domestic violence the same as mass killers? It's not. There are similarities of violence, but we can't brushstroke it that well.
Right.
What we want to do is we want to understand that there's a difference between what I call professional level bad guys, predatory bad guys, or potential bad guys, and understand their motivations, understand where they have universal sort of weaknesses. What is the universal qualities that allow us as individuals, no matter who or what type of person we're dealing with, to know exactly what our priority is? How do we avoid that situation? I'll give you an example. Most people know when they think about a predatory bad guy, they're thinking about a mugger, rapist, murderer, whatever it is, who jumps out of the bushes with a ski mask, right?
Right.
But understand that the most common, the most likely type of bad guy for us to encounter of a predatory variety is someone who uses charm and persuasive ability. And being able to teach people how to recognize when you are being targeted, especially when that person is a master of camouflaging their intent. You can spot them as easily as someone jumping out of the bushes with a ski mask if you know what to look for. Teaching that to young women, for example, and girls going off to college is vital. When we look at the statistics about violence, to me, mass homicide is one category. That's when that professional category of violence, as I think of it, that mission-oriented violence. When we talk about the stuff that affects people on a day-to-day basis, we need to teach them how to be aware and how to read people and understand, does this person have my best intentions at heart? Are they interested in me, or are they interested only in what they want? And, that is a critical life skill, and it's a life skill. And this book is a lot of paralleling skills. It's not just about physical personal security. It's a handbook for how to live life in a way that fundamentally recognizes that nothing worth doing is absent risk, right? We all live. Living is a risky business.
Yes, it is.
But we want to know, really, how do I live in the world with confidence? And how do I do it in such a way that I know I can protect myself and those that I love, because I can spot that danger well in advance and avoid it. And if I can't avoid it, I can deter it. And if I can't deter it, how do I defend myself? And all of those processes are in that. And it's not about the physical is secondary. As I mentioned in my story about the gun, the reality is, I always tell people, training is not about turning you into a ninja. It is about making sure you can think and make decisions under pressure. And the information, quite frankly, in this book, the information that's in here, I wrote it. You asked me the first question, why did I write this book? I wrote it because this information is simply not taught.
Not at
Even if you
all.
go to a self-defense class or a martial arts class, the instructors most of the time don't even know the information in this book, let alone how to teach it. So I wanted to make sure that this became a handbook that, as you said, you could go back to and say, this situation is making me uncomfortable. Let me go to that chapter about sociopaths, right? And the most dangerous predators out there. And let me read that and understand, is this person that is interested in me falling into one of these categories? What if I find myself in a relationship with someone who suddenly starts to manifest these
Mhm.
traits or attributes? What if I really am dealing with a very dangerous person? How do I get out of that situation?
Uh,
And a lot of
well,
that is addressed
my
in
better
this.
question would be, and not how to get out of that. How can we protect ourselves and teach our young people to protect themselves before they get
Hmm.
into that? Because
Exactly.
Ted Bundy, he was fine as frog hair, and he was killing people, killing women everywhere because he
Hmm.
was charming.
Hmm.
And you look at
Exactly.
him and go, he doesn't look dangerous.
Hmm.
Of course he's coming over to help me. Yeah, help put your behind in the trunk. And and a lot of women, and they they prey on people. I think a lot like the child perverts. They sit and they
100%.
watch, and and to me that's when they're hunting people. And how
Hmm.
do we keep ourselves out of that situation? What should they be looking for? To know that that's not these people don't mean me any good. Just maybe the
Yeah.
top two things, top three things, and then they
Yeah.
could get the book and read the rest of them because this is something.
The number one thing to give absolute takeaways right now, the number one thing is to always trust your intuition. Okay. Now, this subject has been done a lot and it's been done to death, and it's been done by people much smarter and more capable than I am in many ways. Like Gavin
Mhm,
DeBecker, who I mentioned earlier, is,
mhm.
one of my heroes. And I quote him throughout the book. The idea of trusting your fear, trusting your intuition is critical. The problem that we have, and there's two problems with that, is number one, we have a tendency to dismiss it, or to override our natural protective instincts. In other words, you encounter someone and you get a bad feeling, and we look and we don't see any evidence that we can put our fingers on and say, this is this is the evidence chain
Mhm.
of why this person's making me uncomfortable. When we don't have that ability to create an evidence chain, what we have a tendency to do is to say, oh, I'm just overreacting, or it's probably nothing, or we go into social contract mode and we say, but I don't want to judge a book by its cover. I don't want to be rude, or, we even go into our ego and we say things like, I'm not going to be pushed around. I can do whatever I want. I've got every right to be here, do whatever. And,
Yeah, right.
you know, and the thing is that what the information in the book does is it helps you to understand how to spot the real signs and
Mhm.
how to reinforce the evidence. It also tells you and it reinforces how important it is to trust that inner voice and to recognize, while we don't want to profile people and we don't want to discriminate, we also want to be able to trust when our danger sense, our
Mhm.
radar, as I call it, is actually alerting you to the presence of potential danger. Because when we dismiss our intuition, we become the only animal in the animal kingdom that would willingly participate in its own victimization. So, my
Can you
recommendation,
just wait a minute? Can you just say that one more time so people
yeah,
can really get the importance of what you just said?
when we dismiss our intuition and we dismiss our radar or our warning indicators of danger, we literally become the only animal that would willingly participate in its own victimization. No other animal would dismiss their
No.
fear, right? So the idea here is not to live constantly bouncing like a pinball machine from fear to fear.
Mhm.
And this is an acknowledgement that, I recognize men and women live in different worlds, right? Women, when you ask men, when
Shh.
did you
Hey,
feel
hey,
fear, right?
don't be giving that away. What is wrong
Okay.
with you? Take that out. He didn't say that, Joe. See,
Okay.
you gonna start all kind of trouble, right?
Don't
I'm
yell.
glad you said that because and bless your heart. And women are crazy, and I know women are crazy. I'm one of them. I'm the head of the crazy women. You just don't hold on when a menses come. We could bite metal. And I commend all husbands and all people who are in a relationship with women. I commend you because my husband is gonna get into heaven. We've been together 50 years. He gonna get into heaven. He gonna say, dude, come on in. You didn't smother her. You didn't poison her. You get to come. Me, they gonna be like, you sit right here in this seat right here because you got some explaining to do, Missy. So I know I'm a work in progress. I'm really
Oh,
working
we
on
all are.
my excellency, and that's what I want you to share with people. What's like an excellent nugget that you could give people, especially young women, to protect themselves, and even young guys, because they'll prey on a boy just like they will on a girl.
Yeah. Well, I would say, the number one thing is to treat charm with suspicion. Okay. Um, I mean, listen, you're a very charming person. I can be charming. We have to understand that context is important. And there's nothing wrong with being polite and being charming, if you will. But when you're meeting someone for the first time and they seem charming and you get a sense of unease, that should be a trigger to say to yourself, not so much, oh, this person is so charming.
Mm-hmm.
It's a trigger to say to yourself, why is this person trying to charm me? And to think differently about
Mm-hmm.
that scenario and to recognize that there are warning signs. And that's one of them, that perhaps someone isn't interested in what you want. They're only interested in what they want. And when you say things like the word no, right? And you say, no, I'm not interested in going to the party. I'm not interested in going on a date, whatever it is. And they persist and persist and it makes you uncomfortable. Understand that that is a very clear indicator that they're not hearing you.
Right.
And this is something that has to be addressed, in the, if you will, the training and the development of our young people, because we all want to please people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the development of confidence in young people is a hard subject, right? How do we get our kids? My daughter's 15. How do I build her confidence, right? So that she feels strong enough to say no, or
Mm-hmm.
to not feel like she needs someone who is complimenting her, that somehow means that this is a good person. And that really comes by way of experience, and it
Mm-hmm.
comes to some degree by way of training. And that comes back to the ideas in this book, is that people have to recognize there are in fact predators out there, human predators, who will prey upon the innocent. And it's just a simple fact of life, and we all know that, we all get it. But so many people truly believe, if I just think good thoughts and I just am a good person, I'll only attract goodness to me. And I believe in the power of attraction. I really do. And the law of attraction. But you got to understand, the bad guys out there trying to manifest the perfect victim, right? And someone like that who just can't acknowledge that someone may actually want to do them harm
Mm-hmm.
actually is that perfect victim. So we have to know when to switch on. Now, getting back to more practical stuff, here's the main takeaway I want to give people. If we're just going real simple stuff, right? People always tell me, listen, Sam, I have good situational awareness. I pay attention to my environment.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, paying attention is just the prerequisite. Okay. You got to know what to look for. And that's the techniques in the book. But let's just give you one skill set. Say you go into anywhere, and this goes whether we're dealing with mass shooters or anything else, any other emergency. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter where you go. Get in the habit of looking around your environment and figuring out what your options are.
Mm-hmm.
An exit route other than the one you came in, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Like every restaurant bar has an exit through the kitchen, right? Every theater has an exit over the stage, right? Backstage.
Mm-hmm.
And rewire your thinking to say, okay, I understand those areas are off limits, but they're only off limits in normal circumstances. If there's an emergency, get out in one of
Get
those
out quickly.
directions. And just getting into the habit, the situational awareness, if you will, habit of scanning your environment and saying, that's where I'm going to go if I have problems,
Mm-hmm.
will give you such an advantage. Because when the stuff hits the fan, what most people do is they don't panic per se and flee like deer in the headlights. They just freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. or they don't panic like a deer running from a car. They freeze like a deer in the headlights, kind of like I did in that
In the
moment when I had that
nightclub.
gun. Yeah. So from my standpoint, what we have to do is to override and to sort of rewire our natural freeze tendency. What we want to be able to do is give ourselves options. And that's why kids crave this. That's why adults crave this information. Because what it does is it gives you the roadmap. It says, here's exactly how to go through life, how to navigate the dangers of the world with a degree of confidence that says, no matter what happens, no matter who wants to do something harmful to you, you are the final arbiter in that equation. And you always have a say.
And a lot of people won't even think about that. They won't think about, I'm going to the movie theater. Let
Mm-hmm.
me see where the exit is. My thing is, let me see where the exit is and how close am I to the bathroom. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
need to do. Let me get into the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom. Okay, and I'll be all right.
Yeah.
And the fact that uh, how do we how do we not frighten our children, especially the little kids? I mean, I think about those kids and the young boys that and their families that have been murdered and slaughtered. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they are slaughtering children. It's like they're killing off the future, and they're not realizing that. How do and when do we start talking to children, about this very sensitive issue? How you gonna come back home, come back safely? It was
Yeah.
so uncomfortable for me to sit down with my husband and talk to our son about how you need to behave as a black man in this country. And now it's like
Yeah.
they don't even care anymore. We don't care who we shoot up. And so we can't keep saying it's a black thing. It's a people thing. It's a people problem. And what
Yeah.
we're not addressing, I believe, is we're not addressing the ravage of mental health in this country because we've ignored it
Mm-hmm.
for so long, and so many people have
Yeah.
slipped through the cracks, and the ones that are getting some help, they want to keep them doped up so they don't even know what they're doing. We had one of our relatives. He wasn't but 7 or 8 years old, but he had a sociopathic tendency, and
Mm-hmm.
people saw it and they went to get him help. And I'm telling you, folks cuss these people out, but they saved this kid's life and probably saved a lot of other people because somebody
Yeah.
was willing to step up and stand in. And that's something that comes in when you say people freeze. They just freeze. That their adrenaline, or is that because it doesn't? They're not fleeing. So where's the fight or flight when you freeze
Yeah.
like that? How do you unfreeze yourself?
Well, fight or
But the book,
flight. I mean,
it's
first of all, let me
crazy
just
book.
say I agree with you 100% about the mental health dynamics in our country. The mental health community is completely overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. And it's even hard for people to just even get a therapist if they need one. I mean, there's just not enough of them out there. And, but there's another layer to that. And the other layer to that is that, our society, not just because of the violence in society, but the media violence, the social media, the dynamics that we see every day, ultimately we have become very, very desensitized, video games, all this stuff. We're very desensitized to violence. And we are, as a result, living in a far more violent world than we ever have and in society. And we see it all the time with people where, a violent incident occurs and bystanders do nothing, right?
Well, they
They
got a
don't
camera
even,
now. They got a
yeah,
camera.
they
They'll
film it.
videotape it,
Hmm.
but they will not step in. And,
Yeah.
and I don't know. And that's another that freezes people, you know.
Yeah.
And and
And,
and you sometimes you can't move. But that's why
hmm.
you got to be prepared. That's why
Yeah.
Live Ready is an important tool in your toolbox of safety. And you got this one kind of. I mean, I'm glad you put it in people's faces because you talk about our evolution into a killer culture.
Hmm.
That's like the way to solve the problems. I'm mad. I don't like black people. I don't like women. I don't like Asians. I don't like Filipino. I think those people don't like themselves and they feel intimidated because they don't like themselves. And getting them into some kind of program where they can understand what they're doing, and some of them will never get it. Have we devolved into a killer culture?
Well, there's a couple things there. I mean, just to go back to your previous comment of how do we not freeze?
Mhm.
Okay, let me address that first because that's really critical. So, what causes our freeze reaction? Understand that fight or flight was never meant to denote a behavioral response. It was always meant to denote a physiological reaction to danger to mobilize our internal resources to either fight to survive or flee and escape. But human behavior is far more complex. We may freeze, which is the most common default. If we don't know what to do, so we go into this oh shoot moment, right? Or what we end up doing very often is we have a complex variety of behaviors. We may negotiate. We may end up, sort of laying in wait for a better opportunity, or feigning surrender, or feigning compliance, and, only to have, sort of a better opportunity. So there's lots of behaviors. What causes the paralysis reaction, that true freezing reaction, is when our brain takes in information, particularly scary information, and we hit this platform of analysis, and we don't have any information to follow. We don't have any proper programming. We end up literally just getting stuck at that analysis phase, and we lock up. We lose the ability to form plans, to think straight, to make decisions. And the most extreme examples of that, I'll give you one example is, if we look at active shooter scenarios, and we look at scenarios where people have survived active shooter events, they will very often say the same stuff. They'll say, I didn't know what to do, so I played dead. Well, I guarantee you playing dead was not a conscious coping mechanism. It was a paralytic response to the extreme of what is classically referred to, or sort of research-based referred to, as tonic immobility, meaning that the body has lost its ability to actually perform because the part of our brain that controls our survival says, you don't know what to do, I'll take over from here, and it shuts you down. Right. And
I'm taking notes. I want you to know I'm taking notes.
Yeah. And the reality of it is that tonic immobility is something that we see very much we see it often with active shooter events, but we also see it far, far, far more commonly with regard to incidences of rape and sexual assault. So the idea here is that it's not that women, for example, didn't want to fight back. It's that they literally couldn't. They lost the ability to perform.
reason through the scenario.
Yeah, or to even take any kind of action.
I remember when I was a young woman, a younger woman, shall I say, and I was catching the bus to work, and I lived in Ohio, in Cleveland, that's where I'm from, and winters could be brutal there. So this is a brutal winter. It's cold. I got cramps. I'm at the bus stop by myself. Some little kid put a gun to my head and said, "B, give me your pocketbook." I turned around and snatched the gun away from him. I was so pissed off. How dare you? And I threw the gun across the street, and it went off. And I was like, "Oh, you think your behind was gonna shoot me? You think you was gonna shoot me?" And I smacked him, and he almost fell down. He got to run. Me and my crazy behind. I ran right behind him. He ran through the project screaming, "Help! Help! She gonna try to kill me! Because they heard the gunshot." I said, "If I catch your behind, I will. I won't pistol whoop you with your." And I was like, after I went back and I missed my bus, so I had to wait again. And I said, that was like one of the stupidest things you could have done in your life. This kid could have shot you. But there's a phrase, there's a saying that says, God watches over old folks, babies, and fools. And I was a baby fool at that time. I was like, and you just never know. You don't know how you're going to react. I mean, I've seen people and mothers pick cars up off of a child. The adrenaline is just going and going and going. And then when it stops, it's like, I think I had an out-of-body experience. Maybe that really didn't happen, but it did. And I said, God, thank you for saving my stupid behind. I won't do anything that's stupid ever again. From the lessons you were telling us about, we were talking about the
killer culture.
I'm glad somebody was paying attention to this conversation.
No problem. We're
having
fun.
In all humility and all honesty, have we devolved into a killer culture, and violence is the way to solve problems?
Well, I mean, I think that what I'm getting at when I talk about the killer culture is I'm talking about the influences of our society that have really made it in such a way far more dangerous and has enabled something like mass homicide to take hold. So if you actually think about it, prior to about 1990, there was no mass homicide dynamic. There was no active shooters. You'd have to go back a decade or so to find the last event, and then several decades before that. But around 1990, it started as a phenomena, if you will, and it just took hold and never backed down, right? It's been increasing ever since. So you got to ask yourself this question of what changed? What's going on here? And, is it guns or is it something else? And when we look at the dynamics, well, guns have always been around, they've been a part of society. What really changed here? And I lay out a lot of different things. We talk about the advent of the 24-hour news cycle, right? And the fact that people, are inundated with this. And then the idea of the internet coming around where now everybody can be famous, right? Or they think they can. This sort of narcissistic society that we've created of everybody thinks their opinions are, valid, regardless of their education or their understanding of a subject matter. All of this kind of stuff has contributed in many, many ways to a deeply what we would call character disordered, segment of the population. And a character disorder being defined as someone who doesn't take responsibility, right? And it's this mentality that says not so much that the reason why I'm not happier is because I'm not good enough, smart enough, whatever. It says the reason I'm not happy is because it's your fault.
Right.
You're to blame for all my problems. And when we start getting a very specific manifestation of that, where people start to blame a specific racial group, cultural group, whether it's Jews, blacks, whites, Christians, Muslims, you name it.
They don't care.
Men, women, it doesn't matter what it is. When you start to fixate in that way, it creates a specific kind of narcissism that is very, very toxic. Right. And all of the racism and all the stuff that we see is rooted in this. We see this more now than we've ever seen culturally. All right. Maybe we saw some elements of this back in Nazi Germany and things like that, but we're seeing some profound levels of hate and directed segmentation of directing it at the other. And this is the other. Now that dynamic is bad enough.
That's the "it's your fault" crowd.
Yeah.
We gonna blame it all
and it's
on
not
you.
just, a society is to blame or I'm a victim. It's that this group is to blame for all of my problems. And in their mind, all the world's problems.
Right.
So for example, the mentality that Israelis, Jews, Zionists, whatever, are to blame for all of the problems in the Middle East it's preposterous, first of all. But the idea here is that it's a very specific hook that's going on right now, or the idea that oppressors, the occupiers are somehow oppressors. And, there's this segmentation of oppressor versus oppressed, you know what I mean? And instead of looking at people as individuals and, basing it on their character. But the idea here is that is toxic. All right. And when that dynamic, that psychology starts to go into some other dynamics, such as believing truly that they are not only being victimized by that group, but they are simultaneously fully superior in every way to that group.
And entitled. It's the entitlement that gets me. Well, you have it and you don't deserve to have it. I don't care if you worked for it. I don't care if
That's
you put
right.
your blood, sweat, and tears in it. I'm going to break in your house, kill up your family, and steal all your stuff. And you had mentioned this earlier about people living in safe environments and, behind the security and all of this. People could still, we had he was the black godfather of the entertainment industry, Mr. Avon. Somebody went into his home in a secure place, went in his home and killed his wife, for no reason. Nancy Pelosi's husband, the Speaker of the House, a guy broke into her house and tried to beat her husband to death. It's like they don't care, well, I'm entitled to this. I'm supposed to have this because I am. Not I can get out there and take my behind to work and work for it. It's that entitlement thing. And these new generations, they feel like, could you imagine still living with your parents at 38 years old?
I can't. And but you're right. We're living in the age of entitlement.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I should
So,
have everything you have. Really?
mhm,
One of my girlfriends, she has a bunch of kids, and her son, when you say, where did that dynamic change? And we still don't know what changed him and changed him back into a reliable product, a productive person in society. But when he was young, him and his friends decided to steal from his mother. Okay, you don't steal from your mama, fool. Anyway, they straightened that whole thing out. And after people talked to him, he was shamed into having to take responsibility for his
yeah,
actions and his decisions.
good for
And
him.
that's another thing I don't think people are not being held accountable. Oh yeah, well you did this. Well, you don't worry about this. We'll take care of it. You seen people out here, a lot of well, not a lot, but the entertainers were paying a guy to get their kids into college on scholarships that they didn't even go.
Yeah,
They felt entitled to it.
yeah,
One little girl
exactly.
got on the internet and said, I didn't really want to go to college. I just wanted to go to college for the parties. And you
Hmm.
say this on
Yeah,
Facebook or Instagram?
yeah,
Where's the credibility and how much of society and how much of us, I'm talking about the leaders, because you're in a leadership position as well as I am. How do we stop, curtail, short circuit this mentality that I'm entitled to whatever I'm entitled to, and
yeah.
you have nothing to say about it?
It is a remarkably deep problem. Okay, but I would say, I mean, off the cuff, I would say it starts in the home, right? And you got to model the behavior. The challenge that we have is that we've created that age of entitlement. Everybody feels that they're entitled to happiness and a perfect life. And all you have to look at all this nonsense about safe spaces. And, we have so much bubble wrap around society already. And people are talking about microaggressions. I mean, it's like, these are in many ways people that really don't understand what real danger is, what real aggression is, what real violence is. And, but they still have this entrenched victim mentality. And that idea of building character and holding people accountable is so important. But the nature of that chapter, Killer Culture, it really addresses mass homicide. And
Mhm.
it talks
Yeah.
about this psychological cocktail that you get these caustic chemicals, right? Whether it's narcissism or paranoia of this type, and they're both caustic. But
Mhm.
when you put them together, it makes an explosive cocktail, and you have this predisposition of someone who could commit mass homicide. I talk about in the book, and I postulate to a degree that one of the things that we saw as a very odd thing was that right around the time mass homicides really started to ramp as a manifestation of violence, we started to see serial killers drop. And I wonder whether there's a similarity there of thought and psychology. And I truly believe there is. And, the idea here is that these people have always been around, right? Being
Mhm.
able to spot them and get intervention is critical because my personal belief is that a certain percentage of these folks, like for example, Eric Harris, who's the primary Columbine killer, Eric Harris is believed now after the fact by the FBI and a variety of other people to be a true sociopath, someone who was born that way and was going to be on a mission to destroy the society, the world in some fashion as best they can. And nothing was going to derail that. It was the where and when and how was only going to be the expression. But the vast majority of people who commit mass killings, in my opinion, like workplace shootings and things like that, most of them can be intervened with. And a lot of it comes down to being able to recognize those warning signs and knowing how to intervene. Because I truly believe a lot of them don't want to commit the mass homicide. They're not looking to actually execute on it. They just want the attention. They want someone to actually take them seriously and to sort of address that in advance. And
So is that the
and this is not something
justification?
that's my own
So
theory. This is
is that the justification for becoming a mass killing, a mass shooter? Like the guy in, I think it was in Las Vegas, when he,
mhm.
and how were the hotel staff supposed to know what he had? Did he carry himself differently? What did he do? What should they have been looking
Yeah.
for? Because this guy seemed like
And
he was bound, and he was bound and determined to kill as many people as he could.
He
For,
was,
for
and
what?
the warning signs would have been far earlier than just
Uh,
the
okay.
behavioral indicators at the hotel, right? Here's the thing. All mass killers have one thing in common. I always tell people that there are a couple things in common, but I always tell people that there's no difference really between a school shooter and workplace shooter and a terrorist. They're all terrorists. They're all
They're all
fundamentally the
terrorists.
same. The only
Oh,
difference is
so
ideology.
you can't say that, Sam. This is America. We don't have terrorists. We don't have
I
homegrown violence. Timothy McVeigh would beg to differ from that, and
I
everybody
would
that he
absolutely
killed.
say we do. And why I say they're all the same is because the only differentiator is ideology. One's personally motivated, another one's politically motivated. At the end of the day, the MO is the same, right? So the reality of it is, what we have to understand here is that when we think about terrorists, right, what is the real objective? It's not to kill thousands of people or hundreds of people or dozens of people. It's notoriety. Okay. They're mad and they want everybody to know why they're mad. And their mechanism for creating that notoriety is the fastest way to do it is through mass killing. All right. And we've reinforced this cycle by virtue of the news media. So the
Mm.
news media is in many ways, all right, a co-conspirator to this dynamic because the second there's another mass shooting,
They go on to the next
it's
story.
all on the news, and we're going to keep it on the 24-hour news cycle. Why did he do it? What were his motivations? What was going on? What was his favorite color? What food did he eat that morning? And all that does is reinforce the next copycat dynamic that's looking at that and saying, boy, if I do something similar, I will be considered everyone will know my name. So the idea here is the fastest way to pull the fuel out of the fire is actually not even to give these guys that platform.
Right.
How do you do that in the nature of social media and everything? It's very challenging, but that really is the fastest way to positively affect change with regard to mass killing as a phenomena is there has to be some kind of control measure put in place where you report the incident, you don't share their name or their motivations or their manifestos or anything like that. The public needs to know what's going on, but they don't need that level of depth. And giving people that platform is a problem. It's not just my theory. This has been demonstrated for 30 years in the counterterror community, in the intelligence community. This is what needs to happen. No one's ever embraced that on the media side. People like Anderson Cooper, I remember distinctly after Sandy Hook, he got up there and he says, "We will not say this shooter's name." Right. And
Right.
that was an example of like they're trying. Some people are trying, but it doesn't take hold if it's not universal.
And we all have to, have some accountability. They, when they say when you see something, say something. Don't just videotape it. Call
Mhm.
somebody that can help you. Call a first responder. Don't just sit around and videotape it. This on the phone. I mean, on the phone. On with me today is Sam Rosenberg. He has written a phenomenal book called Live Ready. He is a security specialist, has secured and kept safe very high profile people, and he decided to put his information in a book so all of us could have access to it. Get the book, Live Ready. Live Ready. You ready? You ready, Sam? You ready? You
I'm
getting us all
I'm
ready?
ready.
Are you? And it's a good thing, because somebody had to do it. Is this your only book, or can we expect more Sam Rosenberg nuggets?
So I've written two other books before this. They're both small. One is a book called The Traveler's Guide to Personal Security, and it was written because I had a lot of clients traveling, and I wanted to make sure they had kind of a
Okay, I want that
handbook.
one. I want that one too. And what's the other
Mhm.
one?
And then the other book I have is called The Path of the Victor, and it's really just a philosophy book.
Uh,
And it's more of the mindset. It's like, what is the true sort of the nature of the real virtues of, sort of what do you learn about how to think and your mindset of philosophy around being a warrior, being a
okay,
victor,
so
whatever.
I get Roger Neal. Okay, hook me up with Sam Rosenberg. Listen, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us, with my
Thank
cyber
you.
babies and our world family, and tell people how they can get a copy of Live Ready.
Fastest way is anywhere books are sold. Amazon, go to Amazon, type in Live Ready, Sam Rosenberg, it'll pop right up. We were the top new release in our category all of last month.
See that?
So it's out there. And you can also go to livereadybook.com. That's
Okay.
my landing page for this. It'll give you all access to me, my website, my information. And livereadybook.com will also have links to all of the various Barnes and Noble, Amazon, etc. But I truly hope that people embrace this book, buy it for the ones you love, read it, study it, reach out to me with questions directly. And thank you so much for having me on this
It
show.
has been my distinct honor and pleasure to share this time with you. Godspeed. May your book become a bigger bestseller. And please know that you have a place to land with Roger Neal. Thank you, Roger Neal, for making sure we
Thank you.
got connected. You enjoy your brand new year. And just so you know this is just me. I'm expecting my books to come. I want them autographed. Oh, I know you didn't think I saw that t-shirt that you got on that say Live Ready. You ain't fooling nobody. I saw it. You just gave me a little bit. I'm like, and I want one of those too. I'm telling
Tell
you.
Roger
Yeah,
your size and you
we
got
got.
it.
I don't care how big it is. My husband bought me a t-shirt this big, and he know I'm not that big, but it's like a dress. And the fact that he bought it for me, and I love him for that. May the universe continue to open up and conspire for your great success. I am Dr. Mother Love, and remember this: no matter how big or tall, short or small, thick or thin, it matters not what skin you're in. Everybody needs some mother love now and then. Peace and blessings, everybody.